Introducing you to people across North Carolina and around the world who put their Catholic faith into action. This is FaithWorks on Catholic 540 AM Divine Mercy Radio. Now, here's your host for FaithWorks, Ellen White.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of FaithWorks on Divine Mercy Radio. Our show highlights individuals through God's grace who put their faith into action daily. Amazing people who have an interesting, sometimes overlooked, impact on our Catholic faith. On FaithWorks, we share their stories. I'm your host, Ellen White. Today, we have a special guest returning to the show, Teresa Tomeo. Many of you may remember our conversation during COVID about her book, Everything's Coming Up Rosy, a beautiful tribute to her mother. Today, Teresa is back to take us on a journey through the Catholic treasures of Italy with her latest book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders. For those of you who are not familiar with Teresa and her work, though I don't think that that's possible, Teresa is an author, syndicated Catholic talk show host, and motivational speaker with more than 40 years of experience in TV, radio, and newspaper, 20 of which were as a secular reporter anchor in the Detroit market. You can hear Teresa here on Divine Mercy Radio every day from 4 to 5 p.m. on her show, Catholic Connection. Today's show is a part one, I should say, of a two-part series. In our next episode, we'll be talking with a local couple whose trips to Italy have evolved over the years from exploring their family's roots and enjoying the sights to deeply meaningful pilgrimages to Catholic shrines and saints' sites. But first, we'll hear from Teresa about the sacred places, hidden gems, and life-changing experiences that make Italy such a profound destination for Catholics. Let's dive in. Wow. Welcome, Teresa.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to talk about my favorite place on the planet. I love America, but Italy is where my heart is. So happy to talk to you about the book and Italy in general.
Yes, it's such an honor to have you here. What inspired you to write this book, first of all, Teresa?
Well, it's really interesting because I've been doing tours to Italy now, leading them with my husband since 2002. So
Wow.
It's been, that's 23 years. And this started to be an obsession with me because the first time we went, that was my husband and I are both, as I say in the book, 100% Italian or FBIs, full-blooded Italians. And we just felt an automatic connection, first because of our faith. We had recently come back to the church, and we went on our first trip. And so that was there right away, obviously, because Italy is such a Catholic country. But then secondly, we just recognized so much about our upbringings being there. And so we decided, well, let's go back. And we continued to lead pilgrimages, but then we would extend those. Like we'd go early or we'd go stay after. And just the more we went, the more we fell in love. And since then, I mean, I said a prayer to the Lord after my first trip there. I said, okay, Lord, my patron, St. Teresa of Avila, said, God is disappointed when you don't ask for great things. So I asked the Lord to bring me back once a year. And since then, he's brought me back almost 70 times now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Once a year.
An obsession, but a healthy one, I think.
A very healthy obsession. So I was raised in a military family, and we spent quite a bit of time in Europe. And when we lived in Germany, we would take our summer vacations in Italy. And, I'm a revert back to the faith. And when we were there, unfortunately, it wasn't about pilgrimage. It was just going to the beach and enjoying the sights at the beach, which was incredible. And then after my husband and I had been married for a number of years, I was able to travel with him to northern Italy and took it upon myself to really find some locations there that would help me deepen my faith, and several saints, St. Francis of Assisi, several saints really just spoke to me on that trip. And then we recently were able to go as a family, minus one child, to Rome and various sites there. So what is it, Teresa, about there's just something special about the country, the beauty, the terrain, the sacredness. Speak to that for me for a minute.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of everything. And what's interesting is I just wrote an article for the National Catholic Register. There are 3 new surveys that came out where Italy is still a top destination. not just for Catholics and other Christians, but for honeymooners, for families, for people who are looking for, and this is like the new thing in travel the last couple of years, that they say is transformative experiences. And what's more transformative than getting closer to God, especially through the churches and through the saints? But there's so much in Italy in terms of it being a Catholic country. But then the beauty is just so incredible. And every region has so much to offer. And just when I think I've seen it all, having been all over the country, north, south, east, and west, we'll go to another town. And I'm like, I love this place. This is incredible. Or I'll go to someplace else along the beach somewhere. You mentioned the beach where you've got the Adriatic on the east. You've got the Mediterranean. You've got the Amalfi Coast. You've got so much. It's just such a unique combination of so many different things: art, culture, food, wine, land. It's just unique in that way, where it has so much to offer so many different people.
I wonder if there are any other places across Europe that come close to what Italy has to offer.
That's a good question. Now, I've been to many places. I've been blessed to travel and lead pilgrimages in the Holy Land, which is phenomenal. Greece is beautiful. Greece might be comparable in terms of history, but not so much, of course, the Catholic faith. Of course, there's a lot of Christianity there because of St. Paul and Corinth and whatnot. But I still think Italy tops them all. I'm probably somewhat biased because of my upbringing and my heritage, but I don't know. There's not too many places like Italy, which is why it remains a top destination so much.
I'm definitely an Italian wannabe. I've got Irish ancestry, but I'll claim it. Okay. Like I said, this is part one of a two-part series. And I also said we'll be talking with a local couple whose travels to Italy evolved from sightseeing to a pilgrimage experience. In many ways, that mirrors what your book captures, Teresa. How has your own experience changed over the years?
Well, I think it's changed in the sense that I started to combine it into more of a travel experience and a learning experience in addition to a pilgrimage. Pilgrimage is always most important for me and Deacon Dom, and we also took the big step 2 years ago to buy a place in Italy. So now we live there half a year, 6 months a year. And so I think that's what's changed, is that we're taking it more seriously because we want to learn more and really infuse ourselves into the culture and adopt it more. We're taking a class to learn the language more fluently. So I think we've taken it much more seriously to be a part of this amazing country and to call it our second home. So seeing so many things, learning so many things, learning even more about Italian cooking, which I grew up with, and on both sides of the family, and Dominic the same thing. Just learning how to cook the true Italian way. So it's more of a totally immersive experience for us, I think, in many ways.
I'm curious, did you choose a village that is close to your family heritage or history, or how did you choose the location where you want to live?
That's what's funny because it's a great question. Because so my family is from, my father's parents are both from Calabria.
Okay.
My mother, her father was from Campania, up in the hills above Salerno.
Right.
And her mother was from the beautiful region of Basilicata, also in a gorgeous town called Anzi in the hills. And then Dom's family, his father was from Abruzzo, and was from Naples, so we're not anywhere near where we live. We actually live now in central Italy in Umbria. But what we did is we were all over and we were deciding where do we live, and we just fell in love with Umbria because it's the other Tuscany. It's kind of a secret, and I would like to keep it that way, except the people that come with us on our trips. That's the only people I want to come there. Let's see if I can limit that. But no, it's because it's central, and it's only 2 hours north of Rome, 2 hours from Florence, an hour from Cortona. You could be anywhere in, really, I mean, some of the big places in under 3 hours, and the Amalfi Coast is about 5 hours, but it's so peaceful. It's a tiny little town of 200 people. It's only residential, but we're very close to all the conveniences, so it's got the perfect combination. And I really wanted the quiet and the peace coming from a big city. You know, Detroit's a huge metropolitan area. But I wanted the peace, and I just wanted to feel like I was part of a little town. And so this has everything. It has the village, it even has a little parish down the street from us. And so my husband is able to serve there as a deacon, and this town is so cute. My friends tell me when they come visit, there's pictures of it in the book, by the way, in Italy's Shrines and Wonders, that they feel like they're Snow White or Cinderella walking into a movie set.
Oh,
That's how picturesque it is.
Goodness, that is so incredible. I've got so many questions for you about getting settled there for 6 months out of the year, but we'll come back to that. So I want to talk about Italy as a spiritual destination, Teresa. You know, it's so breathtaking, and the historical sites there are just incredible. But your book focuses on its Catholic heritage. What are some of the most spiritually significant places you cover in the book?
Well, I think we have to start, of course, with the Eternal City of Rome, because it's the home of the Catholic Church, the Holy See, the Vatican. And then, of course, you have so much about St. Paul and St. Peter, who are always seen together in Rome, especially when you walk up the Villa di Conciliazione, the main street going up to St. Peter's. You have, St. Peter on the left, St. Paul on the right. You have St. Paul outside the walls, the other major basilicas. You have the Cathedral of St. Peter's as well, the basilica. Then you have, of course, the other major churches, the major, of course, churches of St. Mary Major, St. John Lateran, St. Paul outside the walls, and St. Peter's are the four major basilicas in Rome. And then you have ancient and Christian Rome. So you go to the Colosseum, and if you have a guide that knows their history, they will talk about the persecution there. And then you have just so many, the trails of the saints. You have so many saints that lived and died in Italy, and St. Paul lost his life there. St. Peter lost his life there. St. Paul was beheaded, and you can go to the place where that happened. It's called Tre Fontane, Three Fountains, because tradition says that when he was executed, when his head was chopped off, not to be gross for our listeners, but that's what happened, it bounced 3 times, and a fountain sprouted up on the different places where his head bounced. I mean, that's what they tell you when you go to that church. Then, of course, you have St. Peter, who was of course, crucified upside down right there, and there's a spot right outside St. Peter's. You can see where it actually happened. So there's such great saints who were there, who lived there. You've got St. Cecilia, you've got St. Agnes. I mean, the book is filled with the saints that are in Rome. So, and these famous churches, these major basilicas that have so much to offer us in terms of our faith.
You talked about the importance of having a Catholic or Christian guide. We experienced that when we were in Rome and we were in the Colosseum. We were part of a secular guide. It was kind of a last-minute decision. And my 17-year-old, who was 16 at the time, I can't remember, the guide had said, that cross was just put up there. It's nothing really happened here. And my 16-year-old at the time said, "What? That is not an accurate portrayal of what happened here."
Good for him.
So he waited until her little spiel and went over to her as we were taking a break and was talking to her about it. But talk about that. And what would you recommend that our listeners do if they're planning on going maybe during this Jubilee year or in a couple of years when things settle down a bit, finding a good guide?
Well, first of all, I would say, and I'm not to toot my own horn, but the book will be very helpful. So grab the book, Italy, Shrines and Wonders. And also, I have a separate travel consulting company called Tease Italy, TravelItalyExpert.com, where I do itineraries for people. I've been doing this for over 6 years, very successfully. And you need to tell the guide with whom you're working, and we recommend guides. We have people that we work with, that you're Catholic, that you want a pilgrimage experience, and will they be able to, if you're hiring someone, because the people that I will recommend are going to be Catholic guides. But let's say you're going on your own and you're looking up, you're going through Viator or Expedia or one of those tour agencies. There's nothing wrong with contacting the guide or contacting the company and saying we want a Catholic trip. And they do have, even on these secular sites, they have Catholic guides but you don't know if they're, Catholic in name only. Give them as much information as possible. See if you can contact them individually and saying, I want to ask you a few questions, because if you're going to sit there and you can be nice about it, but if you're going to give me an agenda, I don't want to hear it. I want an authentic, I know my faith. I want an authentic tour. Now, one of my favorites is Dr. Liz Lev. She writes for Magnificat. She's one of my really good friends. But she also is the #1 guide considered in Rome. And she's solidly Catholic. She's funny. And she has a whole team of people that work with her. And the same thing, when you contact their team, you could say, hey, here's what we're looking for. We want to find out more about the saints. Or, my son's making his confirmation, or my daughter's making, their Holy Communion, or whatever. And the more information you give the guide about your interests, the better off your tour is going to be. Never go into it blind where you're just hiring somebody online.
Yes, right. I like that. You said that they go into it with their agenda. Yeah. That is so true.
Right.
Okay, so you talked about Rome and the importance of seeing St. Peter's and the churches around there, but there's so many hidden Catholic gems in Italy. What lesser-known shrines or sites do you think more Catholics
should visit? Well, do you want to talk about continuing Rome? Because there's a whole bunch of Rome. You want to go outside of Rome?
Well, we could do both. How about a couple from there and then a couple lesser known outside?
Okay. Well, a couple of my favorite places in Rome, outside of the big churches. I love Santa Maria in Trastevere, which is known for its mosaics. It's gorgeous. It's in my favorite neighborhood, which is Trastevere, which means along the Tiber. Yeah. And it's in the busy piazza, but when you walk in the church, you feel like you're a million miles away because it's known for its mosaic. So it's beautiful. That's one. On the other side of the road, also in Trastevere, which is very big, is Santa Cecilia. That is one of my favorite churches, dedicated, of course, to St. Cecilia. Her tomb is there. Below is a crypt, and you can go to her house there, and you can see what it was like. It's just amazing. So you buy the ticket from the cute little nuns after you say your prayers in the main church. and you go downstairs and you tour this amazing crypt that has all the history of St. Cecilia. And then there's a really cool church that is right along the Tiber River, and it's known as the Purgatory Church. And it actually has a very small museum that is church approved that's dedicated to the souls in purgatory. And there are relics there that actually are gloves or other pieces of material that supposedly were touched by people in purgatory reaching out to people on earth with burn marks. So it's and I talk about that in the book as well, a very small little church, a small little museum there, but it's worth it. And then, of course, for St. Catherine of Siena, most people would think you see her in Siena. Well, you do. But you also see part of her relics in Santa Maria sopra Minerva, which is, if you're looking at the Pantheon, not the Parthenon, which is in Greece, but the Pantheon in Rome, it's just tucked behind the left, and it's a beautiful Dominican church, Santa Maria sopra Minerva. So those are a few of my favorite places in Rome. Now, if you're head outside of Rome, I would highly recommend to go to the Turbo, which is known as the City of the Popes. You have the place where they had the first papal conclave, and you also have the amazing story of St. Rose of Viterbo. And then you could also go to, as you're heading toward Orvieto and Assisi, you can go to Greccio, which is where St. Francis established the first crèche, and that's still in Lazio. So you're still in the region of Lazio. And not too far from there is the amazing little town known as the dying city of Bagno Reggio, Civita Bagno Reggio, the Civita. And this is one of the most spectacular places. There's also a place there connected to St. Bonaventure. He was born there, and his relics are across the hill in another town that you can go, and you can go to the place where he was born. So that's just in Lazio. And then you get into Umbria, which is where we live, and you have Orvieto with the Eucharistic miracle there, the Corpus Christi miracle. And, of course, you can go to Todi nearby, which is a gorgeous town that most people pass by on the freeway on their way to Assisi and don't even stop there, which is a shame. And you have amazing blesseds there. You have Blessed Jacopani, who was a great writer and poet. And then you head on to Assisi. You have Assisi, and in Assisi you have, of course, the new to be saint, Carlo Acutis, and you have St. Francis, you have St. Clare. I mean, you could keep going in Umbria. Umbria is not only known as the Green Heart or the Cora Verde, but it's known as the land of the saints because there's over 35 saints in Umbria alone.
You know, that's something that so surprises me, that especially when we went this last time, Teresa, and traveled around Rome. And I've heard so much about how a lot of Italians are culturally Catholic. To have all of the saints and these beautiful shrines in their midst, what would you say to that?
Well, I think it's a lot like if you do an analogy. Like I always say, my family's originally from the East Coast. I was born in Jersey City, but we moved to Michigan when I was a child for my father's job. And it wasn't until we moved to Michigan that we started to go back to see the Empire State Building and, and Ellis Isle and Battery Park and all those things, those famous monuments, because you grow up with it and you don't appreciate it, and you're kind of oversaturated, right, because of all the tourists.
Well,
I think it's the same in Italy, but also you have to remember in Italy there was a lot of communist and socialist influence, especially in the north. So you still run into that when you go to places like Milan or, you know, especially Bologna is very liberal. So there's that combination of the after effects of the different wars in Europe especially. So you have to keep that in mind. But I think what's happening is a lot of the American pilgrimages, the Americans and the priests that are coming are reigniting the faith of the Italians. We've noticed that even in our little village, and people learning that my husband is a deacon and that I'm a Catholic talk show host, they've really embraced us and they're asking us all kinds of questions.
That's so great.
So again, I think you take it for granted because it's right in your own backyard. And until somebody shows you, wow, you've got treasures here, maybe you don't wake up until that period of time.
You know, Teresa, I've been a fan of yours for so many years, and hearing you say this, it reminds me of a couple of interviews that you did with St. Gianna Mala's daughter,
Dr. Emanuela. Yeah, Gianna Emanuela. Yeah.
Her joy is so infectious, and it really comes through in the interviews that you've done with her. So she's definitely a shining light, and that's a great example of the faith.
But you know what? I'm so glad you brought that up. That's a great point, because I don't know if I mentioned it in the interview that you heard, but whenever we go to that area of Italy in Milan, she comes and she meets us because that's where she's based. They were from Magenta, right outside the area between Milan and Torino. Did you know that St. Gianna Beretta Mola is barely known up there? People it's no big deal. I'm not kidding. We went to her grave, and you know how all the cemeteries are above ground, the tombs are above ground, and we were with Steve Ray. We had a huge pilgrimage, Steve Ray and I. It was like 2 buses, and we were going to be saying a prayer and meeting Gianna Emanuela for the first time at St. Gianna's grave. And we went to the wrong cemetery, but you would think that everybody would know, oh, no, St. Gianna, they literally, a lot of them do look alike. You think that they would know, oh, no, she's not at this cemetery. And it was literally right next door that where we were supposed to go. Yeah. And the man that was there, the groundskeeper, had no idea who we were talking about.
So I'm busting. I'm busting at the seams to share this with you. So I told you that we went to northern Italy the first trip, and it was just my husband and I. And we went there. It was just my husband and I. We were sharing a rental car with his colleague, and we drove out there, went to Mass, and we walked to the little graveyard behind her church. And we were looking for, I'm getting goosebumps talking about this. We were looking for her grave, and we said, okay, we'll divide and conquer. You go this way, I'll go this way. So we were looking around the cemetery, and I came upon a woman who was bent over a grave site. And you know how they have the pictures on the tombstones of the individual that's buried there. Right. There was a picture of a baby, and this young woman was cleaning up. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to. So I started to back away, and she heard me, and she turned to me, and I was just, I don't want to bother her. And so, we met up with my husband, and I was trying to explain to her, well, it turns out that this woman's mother knew St. Gianna Mala. They were poor from the village, and St. Gianna had given her mother a coat in the wintertime. So she had it. But anyway, it was her daughter, her baby that had passed. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is just so beautiful. St. Gianna brought us together. And then she walked us over to where her mausoleum is with her family. And we were able to pray together. So it was such an incredible experience. And, isn't it just like God to bring people together in so many different circumstances? So
but at least she knew who she was, because our experience was not that. Our experience is that the people didn't even know who she was, which is, to me, was shocking. But Gianni Emanuela was telling us that trying to get the word out about this, there's not a lot of interest, and so that's why she's working so hard to tell the story of her mother and why she appreciates groups going. But the town of Magenta is gorgeous. And wouldn't you recommend people to go and to go to the church and to see her pictures of her in her wedding dress, everything? It's phenomenal.
Yes.
Great
Beautiful experience. Okay. So we know that pilgrimages can be life-changing. Teresa, have you had any particularly powerful spiritual experiences at any of these shrines that you share in the book?
Oh, and it's interesting because some of them have happened not necessarily at shrines, but associated with the saints. And St. Catherine of Siena had a really powerful experience with her when I was in Rome many years ago, for the beatification of John Paul II. Oh. And it was her feast day, April 29th, and her tomb is open at Santa Maria sopra Minerva on her tomb, on her feast day. It's actually open more now. They've opened it in addition to the feast day other times of the year. But back then, it was only open on her feast day, and you could actually go into the tomb on top of the altar and touch the ceramic image of her over her relics and the sarcophagus. And I was trying to get there all day, and I was over at the EWTN offices. I was so busy. I was doing my show. I was leading a pilgrimage part-time doing my show. I was doing interviews with local media because we had people from Detroit, from the NBC affiliate, coming in because John Paul II had spent so much time in our area. There's a lot of Polish Americans here, and so he has a very strong connection with Detroit. So they wanted to interview me, and I was supposed to go over and meet them in St. Peter's Square, and I was trying to get to Santa Maria sopra Minerva, which is over by the Pantheon, and EWTN at that time was right down the street from St. Peter's, and I couldn't get a cab. All day long I was trying to get a cab. I was working, I was praying to St. Catherine, I'm so sorry. I want to come see you and venerate your relics. And I said, okay, I'm not going to get there because it was already 4 o'clock and I had to go meet the crew. So I walk over to St. Peter's and we get into the square, and the reporter says to me, we're going to move you down the street because we've done all of our interviews here and we want a different backdrop. And I'm like, okay, whatever, I don't care. So we're walking down the street on the main avenue, and we're going toward the Tiber River away from St. Peter's. And I'm praying, asking for the intercession of St. Catherine, because I knew this reporter was very liberal and he wanted to do a story on women in the church, which you and I know what that means, right? So I'm just praying and apologizing to her at the same time. And so we get to the Tiber River, we cross the street, and I'm standing along the Tiber, and the photographer says to me, I need you to turn around and face towards St. Peter's, and the reporter will look at you, and so the river will be in your background for a different backdrop. I said, okay, fine. All of a sudden, I turn, and literally, practically right in front of me across the street, was this giant statue of St. Catherine of Siena. And it's right below Castle San Angelo. So if you know what I'm talking about, you go down the street, St. Peter's, and the Castle San Angelo is on the right. I had never seen that statue before, Ellen. I had been to Rome a gazillion times. For whatever reason, I didn't notice it. And literally, she's like looking right at me. And if you see that image that's in the book, it's like she's leaning towards you and like inviting you or like saying everything's going to be okay. And I just felt like she was there. Like she said, I know you couldn't come meet me. I'm coming to greet you and help you with the interview.
She's one of my sister saints. I just adore St. Catherine. In fact, don't tell anybody, but she's on my password a lot on my computer. So, yeah, I love St. Catherine of Siena. She's powerful. If you're just tuning in, this is Ellen White with FaithWorks on Divine Mercy Radio. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Teresa Tomeo, host of Catholic Connection and author, most recently, of Italy's Shrines and Wonders. And we are grateful for our show's sponsor, Thales College. Okay. Wow, I have so much to ask you. Let's talk about bridging travel and faith. For many, traveling to Italy starts as a cultural experience, food, history, sightseeing, but it can transform into something much deeper. What advice would you give to someone who wants to incorporate more faith into their travels?
Well, I mean, it's so easy because when you go to Italy, even if you're not Catholic, you're going to be seeing Catholic things because all the artists were Catholic, and most of the main art is associated with the church. And so automatically, again, people, I pray whenever I see the lines outside St. Peter's.
Teresa, there you go. Say that again. You were going out just a little bit.
I say whenever I see the lines outside St. Peter's or outside the Academia for the David, I pray for the people online because I know they're not necessarily Catholic, but who did those pieces of art? Catholics, and David is obviously from the Old Testament, King David, or they're walking into St. Peter's to see maybe the Pietà, right, or the Baldacchino, Bernini's, famous Baldacchino, and so they're going to encounter Christ, and so you as a Catholic, just by going, I want to see the sites. Well, the sites are going to. It's going to be very hard not to include something Catholic on your trip, even if a person is not Catholic. So, in order to incorporate faith, I would definitely hit the biggies, as I mentioned, in Rome. And then my book kind of walks you through what to see, where to go. And this is what I do in my consultations. Okay, when you go to Rome, if you only have 4 days, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do that. But in between, if you really want to experience and even make it more of a faith type of an experience, is you can't do too much.
Yes.
I say do one tour a day. Go see St. Peter's in the morning. That's it. Because when you go to St. Peter's, if you have a good guide, that's going to take you a couple of hours because there's so much to see in St. Peter's. Usually what they do with the tours is you see the Sistine Chapel in St. Peter's in a half day, which is fine, but that's it. Basta, stop, put a fork in you, you're done, because what you're going to need to do, speaking of fork or forchetta, you're going to have to sit down and do la dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing. To sit down and reflect and be like Our Lady and ponder, because there's so much to the senses, because as a Catholic, you're seeing these things that represent our faith so beautifully, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like so overwhelming. And then you look at the art, and then that's a whole nother level of awareness that blows your mind. And so you can't take in that much. Your senses cannot absorb it all. There's so many epiphany and aha moments that you're going to just need to sit down and take a break. So if you really want a beautiful experience, faith-wise and actually sight-wise, you need to slow down and take it in. Italy, as I say in the book, is meant to be savored.
Oh, that's so true. We were there for just 10 days, and this last trip, we started in Rome and then went to see Padre Pio and up to St. Catherine, and then, all over, and spent...
Wow, you covered a lot of ground.
We did.
All the way up to Siena?
Yes, we did. And we ended up in Cinque Terre for 4 days, I think. But
where'd you stay? Which one? Did you stay in one town?
We did, and I'm going to totally... This is what my point is, Teresa, that we saw so much and we crunched so much into that time that I have some memories of a lot of these places, mostly Padre Pio and sitting on the beach in Cinque Terre. But, oh my gosh, what's the first village there in Cinque Terre? It's the first one.
I'm trying to remember, but my favorite is Vernazza. That's the one I love the most.
Okay, so we took the train to Vernazza. I think that's the next one over. Yeah. We stayed in the place where most people stay, and there's a beautiful beach where you can hang out on the beach.
Is another nice one, too. That's another one.
Yeah, I think that's where we stayed. But I think that's the point. You're so right. You need to not plan so much that you can't remember what you did. That's so important. All right, so, and Your book is not just about places. It's also about people and the stories behind them. Can you share an inspiring story from the book that really moved you?
I think probably I talked about the St. Catherine experience, but I also talked about moving into our little village and what it was like for us and the people that God brought into our lives in this little village where there's this young Romanian couple that came over. They immigrated from Italy for work, and now they're kind of part of our lives. And one is a fallen away Catholic. The other one is a fallen away Orthodox. And we've just had this bonding with them, and they've helped us a lot because they speak English. We speak very little Italian, even though we grew up in 100% Italian homes, because our grandparents and uncles, when they came over, everyone was told they couldn't speak Italian. They needed to speak English. Now, my father spoke it fluently. It was his first language. My mother understood it. She couldn't speak it, but she understood it. My mother was also Italian. But it was difficult for us because we don't speak it fluently. We can understand some of it. And so this young couple kind of took us under their wing, and they're really helping us, and they've been such a godsend, and we've been a godsend to them. So that story has been amazing because I think we're bringing this fallen away Catholic young woman back to the church. She hasn't said so yet, but there's been a lot of experiences. Every time I go do something, for example, your listeners should know, and maybe I can come back on if you're kind enough and you can fit me in. We have an online series that's going to start right after Easter, all shot in Italy on the book.
Absolutely. I would love to have you back on to talk about this. Yes.
So that is going to be a free series associated with the book, and it's called Saints in Italy. It's all based on the book. But she wanted to come. We had the photographers coming up from Rome, and we went all over Assisi and Orvieto and all these different places to shoot. And she said, "Can I come?" I said, "Sure." And so she hung around with us the whole time, and when we brought her to Orvieto, it was the end of October, early November, so there was nobody there. It was empty. And we had a chance to take her into the Eucharistic chapel. And Dominic was explaining it to her on the side, my husband, the deacon. She did have a little bit of information about adoration. She was familiar with that because she was a fallen away Catholic. And she said, "Can we go pray?" And so she went inside the chapel, and she prayed, and she started to cry. So I don't know what was going on there with her. I didn't ask her. But then she also went over to the other chapel on the other side of the church, which is, I think, just as amazing as the Sistine Chapel. It's called the Fabrizio Chapel, And there's pictures of heaven and hell and all kinds of different depictions of Jesus. And it's done by Luca Signorelli. And that chapel is where Michelangelo stopped for 3 months on his way down to Rome before painting the Sistine Chapel. So it's very influential in Michelangelo's life. And Dominic was over there explaining everything to her, and she was like just coming alive. So meeting the people in our village has been extraordinary. And then some of the guides I've gotten to know over the years, it's just an incredible experience. The people are so real and so down to earth.
What a privilege. What a privilege for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've led many pilgrimages to Italy for years. How has that shaped the way you see these shrines and the faith of those who travel with you, like this couple?
Well, I think for me, I learn something new as many times as I've been on these trips because there's an endless amount of information and stories about the people who built the cathedrals, like the cathedral in Orvieto dedicated to the Blessed Mother. It took 300 years to build. And so you're never going to exhaust the amount of information you could get. In every guide, and we always use Catholic guides on our trips with corporate travel. And by the way, if ladies are interested, we have room in our wine and shrine trip coming up in October. Our marriage trip and the other trip we're doing is sold out. But for example, you go to Orvieto and you have a guide, and a Catholic guide who may be more interested in talking about Scripture, so they'll spend more time on the images from the Old and New Testament on the front. You may get another Catholic guide who wants to talk more about the Fabrizio Chapel and the Eucharistic miracle and the frescoes in both those chapels. So for me, it's always a learning experience, even though I've been there a gazillion times. And I always stand next to the guide to listen what they're going to say. And then I watch the faces of the people. And to see the aha moments on the faces of the people, to me, is just the icing on the cake as a pilgrimage leader. We had a powerful experience last fall. We went down to San Giovanni Rotondo, and of course you go to St. Michael's Cave when you go there because it's so close. And we had one of our pilgrims who walked into the cave in Gargano on Mount St. Michael, and the minute she walked in, she dropped literally on a pew and just started sobbing because she was so overwhelmed by the presence of St. Michael. And she was not expecting that. She was just going to go pray. She was a good Catholic, solid Catholic, but she was not expected to be totally just overwhelmed with the Holy Spirit in the presence of Michael the Archangel.
So we went into...
So I see things like that all the time. All the time I see that, yeah.
You know, when we went on this last trip, we went to San Giovanni Rotondo, and my husband, who is a convert, really attributes it to Padre Pio. I mean, just so many things that have happened with him and Padre Pio. It's been incredible to witness. Yeah. We walked in, we got there, got settled, and when we were walking into the little chapel, he had the same experience. And the kids and I were standing there with him, and he just said, he couldn't even speak. And he went over and he said, I just need to go pray. It was such a beautiful thing to witness. So I know exactly what you're talking about. All right.
We actually had, Ellen, we had 3 people, before we go on to the next topic,
yes, sure.
3 people on our last trip that Deacon Dom and I did in October. 3 people came up to us privately and said they're coming back or coming into the church. After their experience.
You know, I noticed you have this foreword by Father John Riccardo, whom I've been a fan of for many years. And one of the things that he said many years ago, and I think we use it in one of our promos, is I'm just here to put Jesus out. He does all the work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you guys are introducing Christ and his beautiful church to these people in a way that they've probably never heard of. And it's just so incredible. So, yeah.
I think there's a real important balance, though. And this is what Father John talks about in his foreword, and I've adopted, because he's a dear friend of ours, being from the same archdiocese, and served as my husband's spiritual director for many years before he began Acts 29. And, Father John, who's also Italian, it talks about the way the Italians live. Italians don't live to work, they work to live. In other words, the work is a means for them to enjoy life. And again, we teach people, okay, just enjoy it. And we have a great combination of fun and faith, where we say the rosary every day in the bus. People share their testimony. Dominic and I share our marriage testimony. The priest shares his vocation story. People can come up and share if they like what they experienced that day. But at the same time, we're doing a pasta class, and we're doing a wine tasting. And I take the ladies shopping if they want to get a purse or a pair of shoes. I'm an expert at that, so I'll take you here and show you how to bargain and whatnot, right? It's a combination of faith and fun. And it's also not hitting people over the head, because I'll tell you what, as you just said, we just bring them there. God does the rest. The art does the rest, the creativity, the beauty. I don't have to hit anybody. Not that I would, because it doesn't work. But you don't have to do that, Ellen.
Yes.
You walk into these places, it's like, holy cannoli. Like, what in the world? How did they make this? You're just speechless.
I love that.
So, yeah.
Fun and faith, and I like that Italians work to live. That's so true.
Yep.
All right, So let's get to some practical tips for pilgrims, especially in this Jubilee year. Well, let me ask you first, would you recommend that people plan a trip to Italy this year? Is it going to be too crowded?
I don't think so. As a matter of fact, I just spoke with Corporate Travel that just did they had 4 buses with Father Mike Schmitz.
Oh.
4 buses. They just got back, and the escort that was working with them, Jenna, is our escort for my trip. She's amazing. She said it went great. She said Rome was busy, but, it wasn't that busy. And as long as you plan ahead, like if you're thinking about going, okay, so it's already, springtime, almost Easter, I wouldn't plan on going. I would never say go over the summer. That's the worst time to go to Italy because it's so crowded. Okay?
Yeah,
unless you're going in to see, obviously, the canonization of Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. Okay, I get that.
Yes,
that's a whole unique experience. But if you're going over for the Jubilee year, go in October or November. We've got 2 groups going. One early October, and the couples trip that we're doing is in late October. That's my favorite time to go. The weather is perfect.
Okay.
It's warm enough. You can wear a little light jacket at night. Sometimes it might get cool during the day, so just bring a jacket. But you won't find that many crowds. It will be a little bit busier than normal, but try to go in the fall, because it's just like I was telling you, the experience we had in that cathedral with our friends in our village. We were shooting at the end of, right after Halloween in early November. We had the whole cathedral to ourselves. There was one tour group at all of Orvieto. We were there all day because we were shooting outside and inside and all around the village. And there was one tour group that we saw walking around with the guide, with the umbrella, and that was it. It was just us. And there were a few people who were shopping in the ceramics on the main avenue there, but we had the whole place to ourselves. And it is such a different experience without the crowd. So that's what I would say for this year.
Yeah.
Go in the fall. And if you're thinking about it, you have to start planning now, because nobody's sitting around waiting for you to book your hotel room. especially if you're going to Rome. You need to get those hotels booked now. It's not too soon. But I would definitely plan for the fall if you're still planning on going this year.
Fall. And, booking places. We had a great experience with monasterystays.com. I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but fantastic. And you put in your information in there when you're going to be there and what you're looking for and certain filters. And we stayed maybe at 6 different monasteries, and it was such a beautiful experience. So highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And then also, I think that if you've never been there before, and I don't know how you feel about this, but what I tell my clients is if you've never been, I don't recommend renting an apartment the first time around, because there's always, you need someone there to help you. Like if you go to a hotel, you're always going to have a concierge, someone that can help you with information, can book a restaurant for you, can recommend the place. If you have a problem, the hotel staff is there to assist you. Even if you have a beautiful apartment, overlooking St. Peter's or overlooking the Arno in Florence, usually the owners aren't there. Somebody meets you, and we've rented tons of apartments, but again, we're experienced Italy travelers. They will come and give you the key to let you in, but then they're done. They don't, there's nobody there to help you. So I would definitely stay in a hotel the first time around, a decent hotel.
Yeah, we did. We chanced it and stayed at an apartment in Cinque Terre, and it turned out that the gentleman that owned the apartment was also a restaurateur. And he was Catholic, and there was a little priest that was in his restaurant at one point blessing his staff. So, God was so good and totally took care of us in this trip. But I totally get what you're saying, Teresa. All right. So what about practical advice for making the most of this trip, like logistical tips or spiritual preparation? I think that would be an even better question. Planning spiritually.
Logistical trip. I wouldn't recommend going all over Italy. I know you did it, but I think you had been to Italy before.
Right.
That trip you just started describing. You want to not bite off more than you could chew, and I'm not talking about the pasta or the pizza. I'm talking about the travel. Because if I had just a client that contacted me the other day, travel Italy expert, who said she wants to do Rome, she wants to do the Amalfi Coast, she wants to do San Giovanni Rotondo, and she wants to do Venice and Florence in a week.
Yeah, that's not possible. Nope.
Unless you stay up 24 hours. Because you're thinking if you're in Rome, 3 hours to the Amalfi Coast, another 3 hours to San Giovanni Rotondo. Then if you're going back up to Florence, that's 5 or 6 hours. You're going to Venice, that's another 4. Think about the things you want to see most the first time around. And so you want to maybe do Rome. And if you're going to do Rome well, you need at least 5 days for Rome. Because remember, I told you one tour a day. And then maybe go to Assisi, go to Umbria, stay in Umbria, which is so beautiful and peaceful. And while you're in Umbria, I don't recommend moving a lot of hotels, too, because that's exhausting. Mm-hmm. Maybe go to Florence. Take a day trip from Assisi to Florence. It's all very doable. But think about the travel time. People look at Italy, they'll say, it's not that big. But what they don't understand is that it's not like hopping on I-75, where I live in Michigan, and going straight down, to Florida. It's a lot more complicated to get off to the different shrines that you want to see. And you have to also make sure you make the hours, because a lot of the churches close at noon and are closed for pranzo. They don't reopen up till 2. So logistically, you have to really map it out. That's why I started doing what I do at TravelItalyExpert.com, because I tell people this is practically, you're paying me for my consultation. You can take my information and, drop it in the Tiber River. That's up to you. But I know what I'm talking about. And a lot of people, I remember I had one couple who, they took my advice, they paid me and everything, but they didn't follow my advice. And they were all over the place. And they got back and they said, we didn't listen to you. And we should have, because we're exhausted. We don't remember a thing. So, you have to just, if you're going for a week, I'd say stick with Rome and maybe 2 nights in Assisi. If you've got, I would say, ultimate time, the best thing to do is at least 2 weeks, because that gives you a chance to do more than one region. So don't bite off more than you can chew, because you will regret it at the end.
Well, and I think it bears repeating. You just need to make sure you're savoring, sitting at the feet of Jesus, right? And just reflecting on that whole
experience. And then
experience.
before you go, pray, what do you want to see, and ask God to show you, because you may have a plan, and when you get there, God may direct you to something else, a different church. And I really, and again, not to toot my own horn, but please get the book. The book is so helpful.
Yes.
I mean, there's so much information there about pilgrimage, about what to do, how to see it, what churches to go to. And I also have testimonies in the book, which is very unique, of people whose lives were changed.
Well, and I also know from experience, Teresa, that there's nothing on the market that's like this from a Catholic perspective that can really enliven your faith. So I really appreciate this. We were looking for this a couple of years ago, so it should have been on the market then, but I'll take it now.
Yeah.
And you're talking about saints and praying before you go. That happened with me. I was standing in front of a statue of St. Anthony of Padua and in our local church, and I said, okay, where should I go when I'm in northern Italy? And I turned around and there he is. So we went there. Hello, come see me. Okay. We just have a couple of minutes left, but obviously your love for Italy is clear in this book. Do you have any favorite personal traditions you do when you visit? Well, you're there now 6 months of the year.
Well, whenever I'm in Rome, I know this sounds corny, but I still do the coin in the fountain. I've never missed it. Every time I'm in Rome, there's that old saying that if you throw the coin, you'll come back.
Yep.
And so when I'm in Rome, I do go. And I know we don't believe in superstition, but it's just a fun little thing that Deacon Dom and I do. We make an effort to get there and maybe have an Aperol Spritz by the Trevi Fountain, which is always fun, and we throw our coin in the Trevi Fountain. And when we're in Rome, we always visit Trastevere, which we love.
Yes.
And so that's become a real tradition, and we usually have, there's a beautiful restaurant that I recommend to my clients, tiny, tiny place, very close to Santa Cecilia in the quiet side of Trastevere. It's called El Drago, and it's named after the piazza. It's longer than that, but that's the short name for it. And it's just run by this wonderful woman, and she's got this little place, and we were going there so much that we used to stay when we were in Rome a lot when we were leading tours. We still do, but now we're based in Umbria, so we come down and meet the groups in Rome. But prior to having our house, we used to meet the groups in Rome and stay there a couple days before. And the apartment we rented was right next to the restaurant, so she got to know us. And when we were done with our tour, we went back for one final meal a couple of years ago, and we booked the evening like we normally do. And we come in, and it was all set up for a party. And I said, I'm sorry, are we not supposed to be here? She goes, no, you're supposed to be here. She says, I'm having a birthday party tonight, but I wanted you here. So she had part of it was her birthday, So that's become a tradition whenever we're in Rome to go to that particular restaurant. And she knows us, and we tell people, tell them Teresa and Dominic sent you. So, there's little traditions restaurant-wise.
So many wonderful stories. All right. So besides TravelItalyExpert.com, where can our listeners go to get your book and follow your work if they want to dive deeper into Italy's Catholic treasures? TeresaTomeo.com, okay.
And, of course, EWTN Religious Catalog. And please stay tuned to EWTN because we're going to be talking about the series as we get closer. It's so beautiful, Ellen, the way we shot it. They had videographers. They had smoke. It was just, amazing what they did. It's like this huge production. So I'm so excited. I can't wait to see the finished product.
So what would you say it's called? Saints and Wonders? What is it?
No, it's called Saints in Italy, but it's
Saints in Italy. Okay, so we just started a monthly segment here called Saints in the Making. So that would go beautifully with that. I would love to have you back on. Wow.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to do a series with you, too, based on the series itself.
Yes.
Just let's keep talking.
Yeah, I would love that. What a wonderful conversation, Teresa. Thank you so much. Your passion for Italy.
Welcome.
Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for your passion. And I'll tell you what, you're not an IBM Italian by marriage. You're not an FBI, but you certainly could be Italian because you love it so much.
I do, for sure. All right. So again, if you'd like to explore more about Teresa's beautiful book, you can get it online. It's Italy's Shrines and Wonders. And I love...
Also, the Religious Catalog, EWTN. So,
yes.
Easy to find. Italy's Shrines and Wonders,
And discovering sacred spaces, fascinating places, and destinations off the beaten path, which I totally love to do. All right. And don't forget, this was just part one. Next time, we'll hear from a local couple whose travels to Italy have transformed from sightseeing trips into faith-filled pilgrimages. You won't want to miss it. Until then, I'm Ellen White, and this is FaithWorks, where we celebrate those living out their faith in action every day. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you missed any part of our program, you can play this show or our past shows by going to divinemercyradio.org and click on local shows. You can also listen to our radio show and podcast on our free Divine Mercy Radio smartphone app, available via your app store. Simply search Divine Mercy Radio NC. God bless.